Founding fundamental principles of our constitutional republic are: we are comprised of, by, and for the people. Keywords being for the people, meaning those elected and appointed and hired into this massive federal and state bureaucracies we see were and still are intended to work for us. By a show of hands out there, how many people now feel like that's the case? Anyone? No? No hands? The government is supposed to exist to make our lives better. Or at least that was the intent. But the government doesn't create anything. All they do is regulate those who do. Yet we have no say in firing any of these officials at all. Sure, we have elections, but let's be honest. The people who win these elections are usually those who raise the most money and spread their message as far as possible, or who can fund a significant enough ground game to go and get their votes. Bought and paid for, of course, by a self-perpetuating cycle of governance. That system has been perverted by those on the left seeking power. Look no further than stuff like voter ID. At least according to 75% of Americans who favor voter ID. Crazy concept, right? Yet they don't pass it. Sometimes new or more lax standards for voting are imposed by those who are not even elected. And this goes far beyond the ballot box. Many of these nameless pension collectors have almost unilateral control to impose regulations on us just because they feel like it. Stroke of a pen. ATF just did this. The IRS, for example, can reach into your bank account, seize your money just because they feel that you may not have paid the right number of taxes. They can do this without a court order, they can do it without a proceeding or even a warrant. Our tax dollars pay their salaries, but it certainly seems like we work for them. But this is not just unique to the IRS. Remember when OSHA tried to mandate vaccines for private sector workers? Yeah, I mean, the Supreme Court did overturn this, but a lot of damage had already been done. Had it not been for Donald Trump's 6-3 majority, unelected bureaucrats would have continued to knowingly and blatantly violate the Constitution. Nothing happens. Nothing happens to them. When the Supreme Court smacks them down, did they lose their jobs? No. But if you were employed by a private sector company and you didn't want to follow what you knew was an unconstitutional law, you knew it, you lost your job. Not those bureaucrats. And to get it back is a prohibitively expensive legal battle. A lot of people are fighting it, thankfully. Another tally win for the large government think tank, I guess. And if you think that's bad, here's another one. We spend like $80 billion on the Department of Education. What do we get out of it? A loss of choice. They literally take away states' autonomy. And when they do, they go to their number one talking point, particularly for Democrats, actually. When government loses control over anything, they turn to some jaded poll that supports their conclusions in a vacuum. And then they scream, democracy, we're defending it. No, they're not. They're the opposite of that. But when the polls don't support their narrative, they label you a fascist or irrelevant, even better. A great example of this. 84% of parents, that's almost unilateral, in Fairfax County strongly oppose co-ed sex education classes in grades 4 through 8. But the district went forward with it anyway. Why? Well, the school superintendent, of course, Michelle Reed, had this to say, quote, honestly, the majority doesn't always dictate right. Huh, really? That's the problem. These people are like untouchable. A recent New York Times poll asked if teachers should be able to provide instruction on sexual orientation and gender ideology in elementary school. Elementary school. An overwhelming majority, 70% of people, obviously, that were sane, they opposed this, while only 27% supported the idea. So you and I, folks, we're not in the minority. But these educational bureaucrats aren't elected. Their contracts, their unions, it makes them nearly impossible to fire these people. It's so frustrating. The only mechanism to do so is maybe change the Board of Education at the next election cycle, which is a monumental task in and of itself. And then getting them to fire them once they're elected is even harder. So who really works for who? If you have an opinion today, you're told that you're wrong, you're bigoted, you're against an elite ideology of very small, very loud people, or that, you and I just couldn't possibly know any better. We live in a government now that will shackle you to avoid choice. School choice is a perfect example of this. Nope, can't have that. You got to do what you're told, fall in your lane, go to the school we tell you to. And vouchers, we can't allow you to choose which school. That might breed competition, God forbid. The elites seek to rule over us, not by our consent, but by fiat. This is why they can't stand Donald Trump, because he's the people's president. Look at this. Never before in modern history has a president been so well connected to John Q. Public. He walked in that arena, the crowd went ballistic. They love him. He is doing more out of office than the guy in office. Remember back to Ohio? But then this was spotted. Joe Biden at the beach in Delaware as the country just completely crumbles. Isolated as always, doing nothing to connect with the nation he oversees. I mean, he spent like 40% of his presidency on vacation. But this is why the 2024 election is more important than ever. It's a choice between more government or less government. Those are your two choices. Those you care about versus, those that care about their agenda.